And back for another episode of Won't Be Silent with my guest, David. You want to tell us about yourself?
Sure, Abe. Thanks for having me today. I'm David Gedzelman. I do a bunch of things. I'm the president and CEO of the Steinhardt Foundation for Jewish Life, but more importantly, for our purposes, I'm the lead delegate candidate for the Jewish Future Slate for the World Zionist Congress elections.
Fabulous. And I see, or I've heard that you're a rabbi too, is
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's part of who I am.
good.
But I'm not a congregational rabbi. I've been engaged in bringing Jewish meaning to American Jews for 30 years, and done that in a bunch of different ways. But our work in the foundation is all about meeting people where they are and creating things. Like we created Birthright Israel,
That's
and
so
we
incredible.
and which has been a real game changer for young Jews in America to bring them to the land of Israel, to the state of Israel, and have an experience with their peers where they basically wake up to the fact that being Jewish is about being part of a people, and that people is their extended family. And so many American Jews just kind of don't get that. They're told, well, being Jewish is a religion, and they're not religious. So what does it mean? But they have in their kishkas a feeling that it's somehow part of my family. It's about my family. But when they come to Israel, they really wake up and they say, whoa, this is my people, and it's an amazing people, a
Yeah,
people to be
I
proud
I'm guilty of resisting going to Israel. And when I was 16, my sisters each went when they turned that. And that goes back to the conversation about being an assimilated Jew and the issues about what problems arise culturally by not accepting who you are and your heritage. But when I started going to Israel, I was like, I can't believe I missed I missed out on all this. It's groovy,
of.
and
It's cool.
it's totally groovy. I mean, the thing is, it's like cooler than Venice Beach in LA here, because
Well,
there's a organic truth there that that comes seeping out of this, the air and then
well,
the ground and
it's alive, it's authentic, it's a
mm,
people returning to itself, returning to history, returning to his land is part of that, returning to its language
right.
in so many powerful ways. But mentioned assimilation. There's all kinds of internalized oppression. And anti-Semitism for 2,000 years, living in exile, we have internalized all kinds of structures. And what Zionism really is about, it's not just return to the land of Israel. It's about a people saying, I'm not going to take that anymore. I'm going to throw off this internalization of the brutality of history. And
Right.
I'm gonna now return to history, and I'm gonna take history into my own hands and take our destiny into our own hands. That's
Yeah,
what Zionism is.
that's a beautiful way to look at it. I'm still, happy to say, call me a Zionist. Thank you. It's a compliment. It's almost like when the N word became a taboo, you couldn't call people of color the N word. They took that word on and own it and take all the power out of it. And it's this really beautiful way to turn everything around on its head when it's meant so derogatorially. And the way here in America, they're talking about Zio and Zionist, like it's some kind of curse. Honey, my dad was a Zionist. I would only wish to have like a tenth of his fabulosity. So call me that any day of the week. And I feel like that's what I love about the platform that you've created is that that's an important part of it because words matter, right? And it's in the title of my book, Don't Start, don't, Won't Be Silent, Don't Stop Till It Matters. It really means everything. And I just did a project that relates to this too. It was a law review article. I did the research and it's called Words Matter. And it's about how the media is biased against Israel. And it's really a deep dive into how this moment we're living in is reflected on not only our assimilation, but the information that we're getting accosted with as Jews that it makes you understand why people don't want to stand up and say, hey, I'm a proud Jew. But it took October 7th to make everyone realize that if you don't say that, you're in trouble.
A lot of people have woken up after October 7th, but and starting to understand and realize that Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people,
Totally.
and that the alternative to Jewish sovereignty is Jewish powerlessness.
Mm.
And that Jewish powerlessness we all felt and experienced and saw the implications of it in that slaughter on that day. And for all these other people to hold that up as justice, as all this garbage about by any means necessary, we lost our land 2,000 years ago to a brutal empire, to a European white empire that brutalized us. We figured out how not to disappear. Now, a lot of the peoples that the Romans vanquished just disappeared. Not a lot of Carthaginians walking around. But we figured out how to survive, but we had to pay a certain price to survive.
Right.
And we had to deny our peoplehood in certain ways. But where Zionism is about standing up strong and throwing off the shackles of that 2,000-year exile in history. Now, also, America is about standing up strong, and we're allowed in America to be who we want to be. We just can't be afraid. We can do that. And
well, it's about having a spine of steel. That's
spine of steel.
That is my mantra.
Unafraid. Proud.
I get, because of my social media followings in the various places, I get so much direct messages of fear. They're afraid of what's happening. What am I going to do? What do we do? But even through the election cycle into 2020, it started then. People are afraid. You have to remind people who they are, that we can get through all of this, and it's funny because as politically there's so much upheaval, in the 60s it was pretty bad too. So we got through that. We got through a war where we were sending our own kids off to war, right? And politically and emotionally and all the things, and the youth culture that kind of erupted. We've been through rough times, and America got through World War II. I mean, there's always things that are just monumental, but this particular thing is falling on us Jews to help ourselves. This is an internal group hug opportunity, and that's why running for World Zionist Congress is so unexpectedly out of left field, and I'm so grateful for this moment. And
well, we're so happy to have you as part of this Slate, as part of this community, as part of this movement. And one of the things that we're about, and it's really important, is that we're not politically partisan in any way. We're about Jews coming together across partisan lines, whether Israeli partisan lines or American partisan lines, and doing this for our kids. The World Zionist Congress makes decisions about how over $1 billion a year is spent for the Zionist movement. And we want as much of that as possible to be spent on educating our kids in America, Jewish kids in America, about what Zionism is, about who the Jewish people is, what the Hebrew language is, how to speak Hebrew, what Israel is. And because of that, it doesn't matter. We have people on our slate who still believe in a two-state solution. We have people on our slate who have given up on the two-state solution, especially after October 7th. We have people on our slate who never embraced a two-state solution, but it doesn't matter because that's not the work of the World Zionist Congress.
We're not here to save the world. We're here to save our souls and ourselves, and that is, we have to come together to take on this fight, because the fight is here. We're in it. It's happening.
Right.
And it's bigger than I could have ever imagined it. And the fact that over 20 years that Qatar has so successfully woven into our system of education and media and politics and just journalism, they're brilliant at marketing. They're actually better than the Republicans. You know what I mean? In terms of saying on message, it's unbelievable. And the Democrats and the Israelis are very similar, not being able to get our message of strength out. I mean, it's what we're not. You know, everyone who says Israel's so bad at PR. You know, they're too busy putting out fires for the past 50, 60 years. So it's hard to have a big long-term strategy. And every time you get, you could breathe, and all of a sudden there's another onslaught of crap. So hopefully that is also part of how we can help with this whole idea of messaging, which is important,
Absolutely.
especially for the next
A
generation.
public education campaign that teaches what Zionism is and what Zionism isn't.
I mean, a lot of after-school activities would be important too here in America, in our schools, place kids to join. I think that's where people feel a sense of community. Like until October 7th, I wasn't part of really any community. Most of my friends aren't Jewish. My husband's Israeli, and I'm in touch with the community through that. But I'm not. Those are his. It's not like it's. Fortunately, he's Jewish and Israeli. And this whole thing happened at a point where it just makes me respect so much what the fight that they've been going through all these years, that it's just anyone that doesn't have sympathy for that and can only look at the other side as like they're the victims, is just, when you do enough research, which I had for this project, as to the history of what this whole thing is. Yeah. And how do we combat messaging? That's going to be important for us to figure out.
Absolutely. Like what you mentioned, schools, one of the things that we want to do is bring resources so that in communities where you have a lot of Jewish kids in public high schools and public middle schools, we want to introduce modern Israeli Hebrew as a foreign language option in those schools.
Fabulous.
In where you live, we want to, in the West Valley, where there's a lot of population, we want to bring it to those schools. Beverly Hills High School already has Hebrew in the public school, which is really fantastic. And if you know the demographics of Beverly Hills, you can understand why. But we want to do this all over the country.
I live in Beverly Hills. It is. I feel so safe here. We had, when the Bibas family was returned, there was this amazing get together here, and there's just in the center of town that was so moving. I'm just grateful for that. It's a coincidence I'm here, and all the various coincidences in life all come together as a perfect storm.
Right.
But
they're not so coincidental in the end.
In the end, right? But it's not like it was the big plan. I'm going to live in Beverly Hills. Just that when it came down to it, and I was looking for a place, this place became available. I jumped on it. In any event, just a brief little story on what made you start the Jewish Future, and who gave the name, and how did that come together?
Great. So
our Slate number 20.
So, as I said, I'm the CEO of the Steinhardt Foundation for Jewish Life, Michael Steinhardt's foundation, the co-founder of Birthright. My colleague in Israel, who runs the Steinhardt Family Foundation in Israel, is Tova Dorfman, a dear friend, who is also the president of the World Zionist Organization.
Oh.
And she felt it was really important that we create a new slate which is centrist, which doesn't have politics, but has culture and Jewish life and the Jewish future and Zionism at its core, that can really be a big tent and include Jews across the spectrum. All Zionists all have to be committed to the notion that not only that Israel has a right to exist. Imagine any other country we have to talk about whether it has a right to exist. My God, only the Jewish state would be questioned in that way, really, because of anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Anyway, Tova had this idea, and she asked me to work on this, and we've been working on it ever since. And it's and she found you, and we're really grateful for that.
I'm verklempt. No, I really am. I mean, I want to live in a world where I live up to the promise that my parents survived, to be able to bring people on earth. Like my mother's, I'll never forget, my mom always said it, I remember from childhood on, I had seen evil face to face. All I wanted to do was raise good children. And that became her MO. And that is what I believe she was able to succeed in that way with my sisters and myself. And my sister, I told you, my sister Rita Lerner is on the board of trustees at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Battery Park. And when the opening happened, you went into that first room and it was all these recorded voices of survivors talking. And my mother had just passed a few, maybe months before that. And when you walked into the room, what she says coming out of the just kind of from the room is like, I only wanted to raise good children. It was like such an incredible moment to be able to know that is who I came from, and that is who I am. And that is because Jews have an ability to survive anything.
In a resilient way. And that notion that the answer to national catastrophe, to calamity, to loss is family is a very, very Jewish notion. I'll take a second to teach a little bit of Torah. In the Mishnah, which is the kind of cornerstone of the Talmud, which it was put together in the land of Israel by Yehuda Nasi, Judah the Prince, in the year 200 CE. In one of its tractates, the tractate having to do with fasting, of all things, but it's really about how do you respond to not only tragedy but difficulty, challenge, to a drought is the way it begins. But the last, it's in 4 chapters. It's beautifully put together. The literary structure of it is very powerful. And the 4th chapter gets to the whole question of the destruction of the temple. And there's this statement that there are 5 calamities befell our ancestors on the 17th of the summer month of Tammuz, and 3 weeks later 5 horrible calamities befell our ancestors on the 9th of Av. And one of them we know is the destruction of both temples. So, and then the second to last Mishnah of that chapter talks about what you do on Tisha B'Av, and that the beginning of the month of Av, you begin to reduce your joy. And then you'd think that would be the end of the whole tractate, because it gets to Tisha B'Av. And then there's one last Mishnah at the very end. And it says, there weren't days as happy and good for the Jewish people, for Israel, as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Because on those days, the daughters of Jerusalem used to go out in borrowed white dresses so that no one would be ashamed if they didn't have one. Borrowed white dresses. And they would dance in the vineyards. And they would turn to the young man standing in front of them. And they would say, young man, don't set your eyes on me. Don't look at me for adornment. It's a word noi in Hebrew, which means beauty, but adornment. Don't look at me as some kind of adornment. Look at me for family, for mishpacha. That's the answer to national tragedy, to loss. Your mother knew that deep in who she was, that the answer to what she went through in those death camps was to bring a beautiful family into the world.
You know that there's a movie, or I think it was based on a book called The Wedding Dress. Are you familiar with this? It was in one of the DP camps. They were rushing immediately. They were getting so many marriages happened in the DP camps immediately after So there was one camp where there was, nobody had anything, but there was one wedding dress, and they just kept, and that was the one.
Oh, everybody, they rotated it.
Actually, Sophia Loren's son is trying to pull this movie together, but coincidentally, But yes, I mean, that was the whole thing. All they wanted to do is immediately just like have a sense of family because they lost their families. Why
They
wouldn't they
lost their
want to
fam.
recreate?
They lost their families.
I mean, can you imagine? The Germans yanked my mother's mother out of her arms, like right in front. I mean, they're barbaric.
And so
It's
many stories of people who had had a first husband or a first wife, and they were lost, and all their children were lost, and then they found someone else and married and had a family. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
resilience.
It's yeah. I mean, and we're gonna get through this. I just think we have to be a little smarter. It's not gonna be, we're not. I mean, we're not getting on any trains. You know what I mean? I don't know what they're. See, the thing is, they don't have a long game. The long game,
Our enemies don't have.
yeah,
Yeah.
they might think they do. Islam is to get rid of everybody. That's stupid long game. But in terms of in my lifetime, I'm not. They're not going to achieve this. This anger in the streets is not sustainable. It's just not because I'm a firm believer in karma, and I believe that when you have look at what happened to the Germans, they ended up getting their ass kicked. That was karma, and American power and whatever else. But that was all part of we had that to do that because of karma, which is just in my only political statement I will ever make ever again. Now that we're in this space of politics are just so insane in America, but there was just that election in Wisconsin where that woman won against
Yeah.
all the money and it was like I knew she was going to win even though I was not involved in it at all because the karma of the bad karma that Elon Musk had kind of befallen on this country, there was no way he was going to get that win. Karma
And,
was going to take that down.
and there's bad karma in what we call the red-green alliance.
Oh,
There's bad karma in people who care about social justice and issues domestically, creating this alliance with radical Islam, which worships death, and is all turned towards death, that celebrates suicide bombing jihadist martyrs. For American progressive issues and causes to make a decision to join with that, the karma of that, I'm afraid, can be the undoing of good causes,
yeah,
of
100%.
justice. But that fact that justice has been hijacked by
Yeah,
a very nefarious,
it's
well-planned,
it's
very shrewd, very thought
wild.
through scheme
Yeah,
is
very
is
well financed.
is very it's
From
very
here
bad
on
for
in,
America.
yeah, it's terrible for America
It's
and it's
terrible for
terrible for the
America.
Democratic Party. I don't think
Yeah.
they can survive this if they don't change their tune.
But we know there are good people in the Democratic Party who are more moderate than that. They don't have to be completely moderate, but who understand that movements they care about have been hijacked by these people.
Oh yeah.
They get it, they know it, but it's a struggle. It's a real
Yeah,
struggle.
yeah. I just think here's my new philosophy is that you can't go by polls anymore ever again because
Yeah.
polling is just a failed model in all levels, but you can go by the karma. So from here on in, if I predict whoever's going to win any race, I'm going to search the karma leading up to that because the forces of nature and evil around or that bring them to that point of the election, that is my new gauge of how do people find some. That's just anecdotal for
Well,
me
all
because
I
I've
can
been
say is
enjoying
halavai.
it.
It seems that some folks have won some elections who didn't have the best karma, but
Well, you want to know something? I could find a good reason why the karma is what it is with where we are
yeah.
because Biden should never have run again, but let's not go down that road.
Yeah, he should have known after the midterms in
Oy vey is mere.
2022.
Anyway, so are there any final words of
Well,
Jewish Future Slate number 20?
slate number 20, slate number 20. And look, we what we're about is people coming together in this centrist way. But by centrism, again, I mean that there are folks on our slate who represent a range of opinions about geopolitics and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and security and peace issues, but that's not what this is about. This is about coming
No,
together for education, and that education can include understanding those issues. But we want people who have different opinions about those issues to be able to come together in this slate, in this movement, in the Jewish future, number 20. Go to azm.org and vote for us.
right. I just want to say that for me, and I just want this message to resonate. This is about love. This is about self-love. If you love yourself as a Jew, and you know you have an opportunity to vote for somehow to help impact how American Jews, I mean, all over the world, but for our purposes, that can improve the lives of our people here in this country at a time when we're going to need all hands on deck. Love is why you're going to vote for the Jewish future, Slate number 20. And
Ahavat Yisrael.
Be well.
Be
I will
well, my
speak to
friend.
you soon.
Okay.